That's my secret, cat. I'm always angry.
Alright. I ran out of patience. On the roost!
Hey everyone, Captain, big fan of Spider-Man.
Avengers! Assemble.
Hello, Peter.
Hello and welcome to the Infinity Saga and Beyond, an MCU fan podcast. My name is Jordan, and with me, as always, talking Loki Season 2, Casey McGeorge.
Oh, how's it going, everybody?
Going good. We were just talking offline, but, this is also the weekend Spider-Man 2 came out on PS5, so I beat the main story, and once we're done this, I'm going to do a couple chores and get right back into some of the exploring New York. So it's been a good time. What a good weekend to have Loki dropping Thursday night, and then I had to wait like 2 hours pretty much and then start playing the game. So it was a good time.
Yeah, because it was
good
what,
Marvel
like 4
weekend.
or 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock your time that Spider-Man unlocked?
No, it unlocked at midnight exactly.
Really? Because that's not
Yep.
what it said.
Yeah, because I had it pre-downloaded and I was watching the countdown, and I was able to. It only let me start it at 12, so I watched Loki. I think an hour later because I had to help my wife with something. So I watched Loki at like 10 to 11, and then had like an hour to kill where I got my dog situated, go potty, give them their medicine, stuff like that, and then all Spider-Man until like 2 a.m. and then went to bed, woke up, and had the day off and just played 13 hours total on Friday.
Yeah, because like when Starfield unlocked, it was like a GMT or Universal time.
Yeah, it's weird.
So it unlocked like sometime during the day for me. So by the time I got home, it was good to go. Also,
do you think that was because it was early release? Because you had like an early release for it, right? So maybe it was a little different.
Maybe, but it was also because they've done weird things with games before, where like Australia and New Zealand, since they're like the first ones to hit the day, like they would always be like the first ones to get games unlocked, and it was just this weird thing. I don't know. I know Super Mario Wonder came out Friday too, I think.
Yes.
So those were the Switch. So.
All right, so we are talking Loki Season 2, Episode 3, which is entitled 1893, directed by Kazra Farhani, and teleplay by Eric Martin and Kazra Farhani and Jason O'Leary, with story by Eric Martin. And it premiered October 19th, 2023 on Disney+. And the synopsis: Loki and Mobius go on the hunt to find everyone's favorite cartoon clock as they try to save the TVA. I'll tell you, they're nailing the Loki synopsises. Like they're even fun, with like everyone's favorite cartoon clock in reference to Miss Minutes. They actually added more words than they had to instead of cutting words they did in Secret Invasion and some of these other shows.
Much better than Nick Fury fights. So Fury has trouble.
Faces a dilemma. Okay, general thoughts on this episode, Casey.
Really good episode. I think it's my favorite so far of season 2.
I agree. I think it's probably my favorite of the Loki total. I mean, this is kind of what I expected season 1 to be more of. Time hopping, Mobius and Loki teaming up, going to different times, almost like Marvel's answer to Doctor Who. And that's what I'm having fun with on this. This season has given us that. We've been able to go to the 80s. We've been able to now go to 1890s and, just get to see this is what the TVA was all about. Time travel and all that. This has been a lot of fun. Plus, we got to see He Who Remains, or as he was known in this time, Victor Timely. And also, this is the episode the scene comes from that I was talking about at the end of Quantumania.
Yeah, I was thinking of that when I watched this morning.
And I thought once I got the title, I was like, oh, this is going to be it. This is going to be the time we see it.
Before we get to that, Can we talk about the Marvel intro for this one?
Yes, good shout there, because I need the soundtrack released, okay? Because I need this intro. I
The piano
really
music.
dug it.
The Marvel
Yes.
piano music was outstanding. It set the entire tone for the rest of the episode. That you were gonna be back in time the rest of this episode. And I was like, okay, as soon as I heard that, it took me a second to kind of like.
It was like, when it first started, I was like, oh, okay, they're just doing an intro with piano. And then you start hearing the notes, and you're like, oh, it's the Marvel theme.
Yeah, like this is the whole thing. And then as it goes on, you're like, oh, the entire theme is going to be this way. Okay. And then I was like, you know what? I'm down for this. If we're going to do this, let's go whole hog.
Yeah, apparently, like, Natalie Holt, who does the music, apparently released either a snippet of it or the full thing Thursday morning. I didn't see it until I sat down to watch it, and I'm thankful I didn't get spoiled on that, because I thought that was a lot of fun just to kind of notice it on your own. Because sometimes when it comes to that kind of stuff, you're almost tuned out sometimes. You're like so used to the Marvel fanfare or whatever, and then it starts going, you're like, oh, this is new. It got me locked in a little earlier, I think.
Not only that, but sometimes, especially like on Disney Plus, you're watching like the Marvel intro, you can either skip it.
Yeah.
You can like when you see it coming up and you know it's going to be like 30, 45 seconds of the Marvel intro with all the characters and stuff. You're like, okay, I can make a run to the bathroom real quick. Maybe you pause it. Maybe you're like, okay, let me grab a snack, grab a soda, something, or you just hit the skip ahead 30 seconds button because you're like, okay, it's the Marvel like logo. Like I've seen this how many times so far? I don't need to see this again. If somehow you haven't watched this episode yet, or you did skip this or you skipped the Marvel logo intro, go back and watch that just for the music. It is outstanding.
Yeah, no, that part was really, really great. And I loved this whole intro, actually, where we get to see kind of where Ravonna went at the end of season 1, where she originally was thinking she was going to meet up with He Who Remains, and Miss Minutes kind of breaks the news to her that he's dead, but that he had a backup plan, right? And his backup plan here is to give this book a present. We don't really see what it is at first, right? Give the book to that window over there, and Ravonna is the one that has to deliver it, and it's a young Victor Timely's house, and
I kind of sniffed that whole thing out before it started, though. As soon as Miss Minutes was like, we have to take this and you have to throw that into that window, I was like, okay, that's going to be a younger version of him, and that's going to be the TVA book, because you can look at the shape. Like, it wasn't, if it would have been like a box or something, it would have been one thing, but basically it was just like the little note, like a little moleskin notebook wrapped up in paper, and I was like, oh, that's the TVA book.
Good job, because I did not think TVA book at first. I'm like, oh, I wonder what this plan is. And then when he opens it and you see the TVA book, you're like, I was like, oh my God, I think is what I literally said. Because, that leaves some huge ramifications. He's getting information that he shouldn't have. The book is written by Obi. And we kind of talked about that in like the first episode when they mentioned Obi wrote this book, that I was kind of like, well, maybe Obi is more sinister than we think. But I think what it's going to be instead is he kind of got all the ideas from Obi to then kind of set himself up, and kind of, I don't know if it would accelerate the timeline for him, because this is where we can kind of get into time travel, the, grandfather paradox or bootstrap paradox, where you cause the event you're trying to prevent, or you cause the event, So
yeah, if you bring Shakespeare's works back to him, did Shakespeare create them, or did you create them by bringing them back to young Shakespeare, and so on and so forth?
Right. And in this case, like, let's say you give him the book, and does he go find Obi and make Obi write the book, and then that's a loop here? Or, when is he going to set up his own version of the TVA? Is this the same He Who Remains as always? And the reason that that's a question is because they go to the sacred timeline in 1868, But when we get to 1893, it says it's a branched timeline. And that to me is making me wonder, okay, well, maybe this wasn't the original He Who Remains. It still could be. It could come from a branched timeline, I guess. But just or maybe it just accelerated his growth into who he's going to be. Maybe he would have not done that stuff later, but he wants to accelerate this to try to get back into power or something like that. It's a lot of there's going to be a lot of questions when it comes to that approach on how that's going to affect what we're seeing here, because this Victor Timely doesn't share too many similarities with He Who Remains of what we know, right? He's got a bit of an accent, he's got a stutter, which we didn't really see before, and he's a con man, a little bit more of a con man. You know, he was kind of pulling a con in there with selling the, having a partner and selling the thing and it not actually working, and then him having to escape and try to get out of there. So
Look,
he's a little bit more of a, I don't know, con man. Yeah.
I'll say this, and maybe this is just me. I don't see how this is gonna sound wrong and heartless. I can't get duped by a con man who stutters. Like how? So I've done a lot of public speaking. I've had to do a lot of presentations or job interviews and stuff like that, where you're trying to sell yourself and everything. You have to get up there in front of crowds of people and various things, right? Okay,
right.
I get it. Some people, like Samuel L. Jackson, actually had a stutter as a kid. I think he still does. He said it comes out every now and then. But like he kind of got into acting. I think James Earl Jones was the same way. He had a stutter, right? So I get sometimes that's something you cannot control. And I'm not, if it's a disability for some people, I'm not knocking that. But if you're a con man, like part of that is confidence. Like you have to project confidence. You know, people have to have confidence in what you're trying to sell them. Okay. When you're trying to sell me stuff that doesn't work and you're constantly stuttering, you're constantly trying to get the words out. Maybe this is just me. I don't see how anybody can have confidence in something like that. I don't see how these cons can work. Because to me, that tells me, even if it's just something as far as nerves, like he's nervous and that's why he's stuttering. If he's that nervous, he doesn't have confidence in what he's selling me, so I can't buy it. And I'm not going to buy it. I get it, we need it for the story here. But that's just one thing that kind of griped me. It was like, I can't, like, how these people get duped by a guy with a stutter, man? I just don't get it.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, I guess. But I think I think the idea is that almost like there's this genius underneath of the stutter, right? And you're seeing it work in the, in the presentation, so they're like, oh, okay, that's how it's gonna go. He's a smart guy, type of thing. But yeah, so he makes a temporal loom out of a that's focused more on light bulbs than it is about time, like we see. But it's like a miniature version of what they're trying to fix at the TVA. Before we get there, though, Loki and Mobius are then tracking down Renslayer, and they get to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which, of course, was a real World's Fair in 1893. And
but before that, they actually went to the 1868, yes. And they walked by the window, like they couldn't, like they said they're there. They're like, okay, something happened, but we don't know what it was. There's nothing here. So they basically just keep going.
Yeah, because then they see that she was only there for a little bit and then jumped to another time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder, it's one of those, like, I wonder, had they maybe investigated a little bit, maybe they would have, could they have been able to find it? I don't know. But
yeah, I don't know if they would have. I like the scene, though, where they're kind of talking to each other and they're like, did anybody of note come from here? And they're right outside his window.
Yeah.
And it's like this juxtaposition of like, they're thinking of like maybe other people that have come from here, but like literally the biggest bad they've ever faced is from there and is right in that window.
Is 2 feet away on the other
Yes.
side of a wall.
But yeah, so this is a real event that happened. They had, different pavilions, like a German pavilion. We get to see a Norway style pavilion that has the Norse gods, and we see Loki, or not Loki, we see Odin, Thor, and Balder the Brave. Balder is also a Marvel character. I love Loki's reaction then of like, why did they include him? Nobody's heard of him. And Mobius is like, I've heard of it. That's Balder the Brave. That's another one of Loki and Thor's brothers.
Thor's not
Half-brother.
even that tall.
Yeah. I wonder if that means we'll ever get Balder. I think this might be it for a bit.
Well, apparently,
Yeah.
they tried to include him like 4 times in the past, like all 3 Thors, and there was another one they tried to include him, including even the costume designer as far as like came out. And I think they said they had a person. I think Daniel Craig. I think they said apparently
For
one
Multiverse of Madness. Yes, he was supposed to be in Multiverse of Madness as one of the Illuminati, and it was going to be Daniel Craig. I think scheduling messed it up or something.
Could be, or who knows what, but it was kind of denied. But like even part of the cast and crew were like, that's what we were hearing on set, that's what he was going to be involved in that, and then it never came about. Just like apparently there was a rumor for a while that they were trying to get Tom Cruise to play a version of Tony Stark in Iron Man. And who knows how far that went. I think he was filming his Missions Impossibles at the time, so
yeah,
probably couldn't work. So they tried to introduce Balder the Brave, and he's been cut out of all the Thor movies so far. So who knows? I think there's a rumor going around that maybe that's Mobius. And Mobius had a great line in there. He's like, I keep forgetting that you're actually one of them. Like, and it's the same thing I kind of brought up last week, that like you kind of forget that Loki's an actual god, and like
right.
Loki is, he's not just a regular dude like Mobius is. Like, he knows magic and he's a trickster god, and like he does some things in this episode, but it's one of those you kind of forget because you haven't seen him do those things in so long. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. He's kind of a badass and he can do all these other different things.
Yeah, and then also they see this sign for Victor Timely's Temporal Marvels, but there's also a little reference here that says Ferdinand Lang. We don't know if that's supposed to be a Scott Lang relative, Ant-Man reference, or just, a little production nod or something that they were putting in there, but that looks like that's in the German pavilion in this place. But
what about Mobius using it as a way to just go around and see the World's Fair and eat all the food?
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, it's kind of like a little miniature Epcot World Showcase where you're able to go around and go to the different pavilions and eat the food of the people. They go to the Cracker Jacks section or whatever to get some Cracker Jacks, and I mean it's a good point by Mobius too. Like he's like, hey, maybe it's a high traffic area. Maybe we'd see Renslayer there, but they end up not seeing her until they go into the Victor Timely show. And, their whole mission at this point is to find Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and they kind of stumble upon Victor Timely. And I kind of mentioned that last week of, with them needing the temporal aura of him, that maybe that would draw them to him. And it kind of seems like more like they stumbled, but I liked how they used.
Don't forget the newspaper too. They were just kind of wandering around. Yeah, and then the newspaper boy says something about a giant clock or whatever he said, scaring everybody, and that's when they're like, oh, wait a minute, that that obviously that's Miss Minutes, but it's one of those like, hey, they go, buy the newspaper, and there's a crude drawing of Miss Minutes in there, and it's like, okay, we're on the right track at least.
Yeah.
And then they start tracking down Miss Minutes because it has, like in the paper, it's got this magical clock or whatever was seen here, seen in this pavilion, seen in that pavilion, scared people over here. So they're trying to like just wander around and like, okay, let's check out. It says they were in the Bavarian section, Oh, well, I'm over here. Let's get a bratwurst. I can imagine Mobius doing stuff like that. Hey, you know what? Let me try this schnitzel. What is this schnitzel here? So on and so forth.
Yeah. So when they're in there, we get this, nice display from Victor Timely as he is showing off his prototype, and then it leads to a bunch of people chasing Victor here as he gets found by Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and at that time he also gets found by Mobius and Loki, and then of course we get the other people that are a little upset about being scammed, and we get 3 to 4 groups here chasing Victor through the fair, but Renslayer gets to him first, and I think she's able to kind of make a little bit of a good enough impression since she got to him first a bit here, because I think it doesn't help here that Sylvie is going to appear and also attack He Who Remains, and since she has the ties to Loki and Mobius, I think it leaves Victor a little wary, of that group, and he's gonna kind of go more with Renslayer and Miss Minutes when they have a moment. But the scene on the Ferris wheel is just absolutely so freaking cool to see this fight scene as they, also kind of get stuck up there at a point, and you have. I always like these type of chases too, where like somebody gets on like a certain object and then it becomes almost like a waiting game of, okay, can we like find a way out before we get back to the bottom where like the people are waiting for us, and yeah, all of that. What the Ferris wheel scene is probably a huge highlight of action for this show, especially this season so far.
Yeah, like I said, you get to see Loki do some more magic, especially one where he makes the guy disappear in front of the crowd earlier.
I love that, and Mobius is like sells him as a magician,
Yeah, and then he's in like the little chicken coop or something outside.
Yes. Yeah.
Sylvie pops up from out of nowhere, and like I said, she did tell Loki that if she caught another variant, she would kill him. Which I get, but man, like you literally spend the rest of your life doing that because there's an infinite number of them. They're never gonna run out. Like at some point, you got to give that up, man. Like you don't have the time, and it's a never-ending battle. Literally, it's a never-ending battle. Just let it go.
Right.
Once again, it's been so long, I kind of forgot that Sylvie was a badass too.
Yeah, we had this scene on the Ferris wheel here where Loki is really trying to make sure that He Who Remains is safe, and Sylvie is kind of keeping a distance. He keeps doing this thing where they're like almost, he's pushing one, pulling the other, using his magic to try to get around them, and we're kind of getting another take on the scene again from the first from the first season's final episode, where they have this conundrum. It's almost the same sort of ethical question, right? Of, okay, do we kill him and allow more of him to sprout up and start this multiversal war, or do we limit free will? Right? As kind of the two options they were presented at the end of the show last year or 2 years ago. And we kind of get this again here where now she is trying to go after somebody that is a variant, and it's almost a juxtaposition of her herself, right? And I think that's what gets her at the end of the episode, not to skip there, but it kind of plays out in this scene too. She was hunted down as a variant because she wasn't supposed to be the way she was, right? And it kind of ruined her whole life. They were constantly chasing her. She was constantly on the move. While just for being her. Right now she's chasing Victor Timely, trying to kill him just for being somebody that looks like a guy that she wants to take out. And it's almost like a reverse of the first season in that case. And like I said, at the end of the episode, when he's pleading of I'm not that guy, right? Like I'm not him yet, or that kind of thing. I think it kind of got to her because I'm sure she kind of said the same sort of stuff to Renslayer when Renslayer's chasing her as a kid, and probably put her in a bit of a spot of, what am I doing here? I'm taking out maybe an innocent guy. We'll see, right? But we're kind of taking out an innocent guy before he even does anything. And that's exactly what they were trying to do to her. And I think that kind of weighed on her a bit and made her ultimately walk away at the end here. But like I said, it also plays out in this Ferris wheel scene.
Yeah. We also get I like like you said, skipping to the end. I like the confrontation between Renslayer and Sylvie. I thought there was going to be like an actual fight scene. I was kind of excited for that. Unfortunately, I was disappointed because there was no actual fight scene between the two. I would have enjoyed seeing it, even if it was just for like a quick minute or something. But it brings up kind of like what I talked about. I don't know if we talked about it off air. When we talked about the Twilight Zone, the 90s, early 2000s revival that had Forrest Whitaker, where one of the episodes, they sent, in the future, they send, once again, who's the girl from 27 Dresses? She was on Grey's Anatomy. Katherine Heigl.
They
sent Katherine Heigl back to Germany to be a nanny for young Hitler. And her mission is to kill a young baby Adolf Hitler, thus stopping World War II and the Holocaust and all that other stuff. The twist being that she in turn takes the baby. They go through the whole episode. Hitler's father's very trusting, doesn't like people around his young son. Consequently, she runs off with the baby. She gets to a bridge. It's the middle of winter. Jumps off the bridge, killing herself and the baby. There's another nanny, housekeeper, somebody who's chasing after her. Doesn't want to go back to the house without a baby. So she in turn buys a baby that's approximately the same age off of a young homeless person, off of a homeless woman in the streets of Bavaria, Germany, wherever it was. And consequently, that ended up being the Hitler who changed the world, not the baby, not the baby. That ended up being the one that caused the Holocaust, not the one that they killed. So obviously, it's Twilight Zone. There's always a wicked twist at the end of be careful what you do or what you wish for, blah blah blah. But this is kind of the same thing. Is Sylvie going after Victor Timely? Does that push him into being he who remains and causing all of this? Or because she lets him live, does that cause all of this to happen? Had she killed him, would this have solved the problem, or would that have made things worse? And it's unfortunately not something we don't know. We'll find out in the next 3 episodes. But it's one of those predicaments where it's like, this, you have a thought in your head where it could go, but it doesn't mean your plan's going to go the way you think it will. And especially with time in the future and you don't know how things are going to end up. That's one of those weird things where it's like, is this something you really want to do? Because if you do, there's going to be consequences. Those consequences there could be greater repercussions for anything than you can imagine. So.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when you're dealing with time travel or any sort of alternate realities and stuff, it leaves a lot up to anything can happen, anything can change.
We can go
Especially now
back
that
to
they're in
the
this non-sacred timeline now too.
we can go back to the Simpsons and Treehouse of Horrors, I think too, where Homer said, I wish I hadn't killed that fish," and it changed his whole life.
Yes. What season was that?
That might have been Treehouse of Horror too.
Okay.
I don't know, where he had the toaster that caused time travel. And it's probably, It might be one of the greatest lines in all of The Simpsons. I wish I hadn't killed that fish.
So he gets away with Renslayer. They get back to his his laboratory, hideout, whatever you want to call it. He has some notes and stuff that they're gonna grab, and then they're gonna try to get to Wisconsin, where his main laboratory is. And they have to take a boat. And while they're taking this boat, they start to have this nice scene of Ravonna and Victor bonding. But Ravonna makes a fatal mistake here. She uses the word partnership, which we know Victor doesn't like. He said it earlier in the show when he's dealing with the people who wanted to go in as a partner with him. And when she goes to sleep, she wakes up as they are dropping her out of a rowboat and leaving her behind. What's your thoughts on this, Casey? He's not a big deal partnerships. She said partnership. He immediately withdrew his hand, and Miss Minutes picks this up immediately. She's like, "Oh," and which is good for Miss Minutes because she kind of has this rivalry going on with Ravonna a bit.
Oh, there's no rivalry. She's straight jealous of Ravonna.
Yeah, but she gets Ravonna gets left behind, and then she has like this determined look on her face that she is going to get back, and she gets back in a pretty good time. Actually, she's in that laboratory.
Not too long after.
Not too long after.
Like right after him.
She's got some strong arms.
Oh man, there was obviously a connection there between Ravonna and Victor, and I don't know. I was reading some stuff earlier. It's one of those. I don't know if there's a romance. There's all kind of thoughts of what the connection between the two is. Was there previously a romance and her mind was wiped along with everyone else in the TVA of things that have happened? Is she a long distant relative or a descendant? Is she another variant of Kang herself? Like a female variant, just like Sylvie is a female variant of Loki.
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard that theory, and I want to talk about that real quick because I think that's interesting. Because not only would it be a little bit of a twist, that's not what it's usually like in the comics, but it'd be a good parallel to Loki and Sylvie, who are variants of each other as well. So you would have like Kang and his variant woman self, Ravonna, and Loki and his variant woman self, Sylvie. I think that is a pretty cool dichotomy if we're going to go that way. But when you bring up relationship, I do want to highlight this because I think people might know this from if they Googled and stuff, or especially during season 1 when they name drop Ravonna Renslayer, and some people might think, oh, it's just a reference or whatever. But this episode tells me that they're going to go more down the relationship path, I think. I think it was clear Victor liked her a bit, right? And
oh yeah, they had a thing.
Yeah.
They had a thing.
If she hadn't said partnership, I think he would have been really sold on her. And Miss Minutes is going to say at the end of the episode too, like, oh, I'm going to tell you the truth now to Ravonna, and it's going to make you mad. There's a few ways this can go. So in the comics, Ravonna is like Kang's girl. He does so much stuff just to be with Ravonna and loves Ravonna. There's this great comic I totally recommend people read if they're interested. It's called, I think I covered it on the show before. It's called Kang the Conqueror. What is it? Only Myself Left to Conquer, I think is what it's called. It's like a 6-issue arc. I read it before Ant-Man Quantumania came out. I also put a review on our blog, where I've been posting comic reviews. It is just full on Kang's the main character. He does this. He has this great. There's this great issue that really focuses on the Ravonna relationship with him, and it's kind of like this, almost like twisted love story of like throughout time, he keeps stumbling upon almost a different variant of Ravonna through different ages and stuff like that, and he's always drawn to her, and he trying to keep her alive, and he keeps failing, and he goes back in time and tries to do something else to keep her alive, and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if that's where they're going to go with it, in the sense of maybe she's not the one that was originally in the relationship with him. Maybe this is a variant Ravonna, and the reason he kept her around and why she was second in command or whatever is because of how much he does love her and reminds him of the one that he loved. They could go that way. They could go the way of he fell in love with her now, right? Like now. And this will become, Victor Timely will become the He Who Remains. And he's going to base everything off of this Ravonna here. And this Ravonna may die. And then he has to go back and find another variant of her. And then that kind of sets the motions of everything that way. It could go, there's so much they can do with this. But I'm glad we're finally approaching this relationship that, when we were first introduced to Ravonna Renslayer in season 1, I'm like, okay, maybe we are going to get Kang then, because we weren't really sure if we were getting Kang in that show yet. And then, they've just kind of ran with it now. We're getting Kangs all over the place, and we're getting Ravonna Renslayer maybe ending up in love with him. I guess we'll find out. But I'm really excited for it. I think she's been great. I was glad to see Renslayer again. It almost felt like she has been here the whole season now, because this episode was very focused on her and Victor Timely a lot. And I really liked that they took the time to spend that on them.
Well, you know who is in love with Victor Timely? Is old Miss Minutes.
This was great here.
Did
was
not
reading
see
online.
that coming.
I was reading online after this, and somebody posted this thing that was really funny. It was like, as I'm reading like the the post show threads and stuff, people were like, "Wow, I really thought we were going to see Kang F o'clock." I mean, she was really going in on him, and she wants a real human body.
Yeah, she wants a body and everything. She was laying it on pretty thick there, and it's like, whoa. Ease up a little bit. Just ease up a little bit. We'll be all right.
Yeah, she was saying, "I love you."
Not anymore.
Yeah.
He messed that up, so now he's got two enemies out there for sure. In Miss Minutes and Renslayer.
And he actually goes with Loki and Mobius. Like, now he's on the other flipped side, right? Like, he's on the total other end now.
Miss Minutes brings up a really good point of why would you cross somebody who knows, which I get, because Timely we don't know where he's going to end up, but as of right now, he is not He Who Remains, so he doesn't know all these things yet. But Miss Minutes brings up the aspect of why would you cross someone who knows all of your dark secrets? And then that's where she had a conversation with Renslayer. You talked about where she says, "I have a pretty big one I'm going to tell you, but it's going to make you mad." So, what do you think it is?
I think it has to do with something about her role in the TVA and her history with Kang, is my guess. We saw at the end of season 1 that Ravonna's variant was a principal or a teacher in a school, and X-15 or B-15, sorry, pointed it out to another hunter to be like, "Look, this is actually, we're all variants. See how this lady is, not actually Ravonna." And I'm thinking it's going to be something along the lines of he's been in love with her the original He Who Remains, was in love with Ravonna Renslayer or something, and brought her in as a variant, and has kind of put her in charge of this as almost like, I'm trying to figure out the way I'm trying to word this, because now I'm also thinking, does she know that she's a variant? I can't remember if she knows that in season 1 as well, or because if not, that might be what Miss Minutes is talking about too. That she's not her actual self. She is a variant of a person who was just a teacher in a school, who now is kind of thrust in this position of power due to He Who Remains making her Judge Renslayer in the TVA. But I think it's going to have more to do with the actual relationship between her and Kang because, like you said, Miss Minutes is now a woman that's scorned, right? And she knows everything about him, and she says that there is something that's going to make you mad. So I think it's going to be more about the power dynamics or the relationship between Kang and Ravonna is what that's going to entail.
I think it's going to be one of two things. Either the fact that they were in love in a relationship previously and he wiped her memory, or that she is actually a variant of Kang herself. So there's something inside of her that, she's capable of doing that she doesn't know yet.
The only thing I think that theory about her being a variant has going against it, I think, is Miss Minutes seemingly not liking Ravonna at all, because I feel like she would love any version of He Who Remains, but maybe not, right? I don't know what her type is. Talking about a cartoon clock, but I don't know what her type is when it comes to relationships. So maybe she is only in it for Jonathan Majors, look of Kang. But I would feel like if Ravonna is a Kang variant, maybe she would not have such disdain towards her. But I don't know. That's why I'm leaning more towards the relationship of them being in love. But how cool was it too at the place where they're having this conversation? It's been a while since Kang has died. He Who Remains' body is just decomposing in the middle of that end of time. I thought that was a really cool visual.
Yeah, he was just sitting there. It's been sitting there for ages, just decaying. Did not see that one coming either.
Yeah. Me neither. This show has just been so good for me. Season 2, more shows have to get a second season on this, I think, because what we're able to do jumping into a season 2 is having more character moments. We've started to got to know more characters like Casey. We've gotten to know more about B-15. We got to know more about Loki and Mobius. And then you get to continue their arcs. Ravonna was pretty much just a judge in the TVA, and she was part of keeping secrets. But now we're at this whole other arc of her that's more fun. Her trying to take down Kang himself now is with Miss Minutes. There's so much you can do with shows that you can't do in just movies. Like I said, this episode, the second half of this episode is mostly just Kang and Ravonna. And in a movie, you're not going to spend that much time on just those two characters. And so far, each episode has been 50 plus minutes. And they've been able to really just dive into the characters and take their time with the story. The setup of season 1 is over. So now we just get to continue those character arcs, continue those moments. And that's why I'm hoping, like they said, that they want to have more shows with more seasons. They continue that, because sometimes it feels like you just get, especially TV nowadays, Casey. We're used to talking about Superstore, which had 20 some episode seasons, 16 episode seasons, right? They had a lot of episodes. Yeah. TV shows nowadays, they have 6 to 8 episodes. It's just as it's getting good and just as you're getting familiar with the characters, the season's done, and then it either gets picked up or it ends with 6 episodes or 12 episodes, and that's all you get. So the fact that all these Marvel shows so far have been one season and done. Hopefully we're getting more She-Hulk because you and I are fans of that. We talked the show. Seeing those characters again would kind of feel like what it's like to see Loki characters again. Where you're like, oh yeah, we're back in the law firm. We're with Jennifer and all of her friends, and this is so much fun. And that's the kind of thing that I've been missing when it comes to streaming shows, and especially these Marvel shows so far, where everything's just been, one and done, and then not seeing the character for years.
So I do agree with you, but I think there's a fine balance to strike. So I am a huge fan of the X-Files, and I'm binging the X-Files again right now. So I'm in the middle of like season 2 or 3. And there was Kamal Nanjiani. He never finished it, but he did a podcast, a rewatch podcast of the X-Files in the mid-teens, like 2015, 16, somewhere in there. And he's had people who wrote some of the episodes, and like he's had a lot of people involved with the show on that podcast. So as I'm going to work, I'm listening to some of those things going on. And something that the writers had an issue with was, so back then in the 90s, early 2000s, they would do 24, 26 episode seasons, right? At an hour apiece. So they got to do 26 hours of television. 45 minutes, but 26 hours of television, right? So another show like that I liked that I just haven't been able to finish is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Same thing. They would do like 20. The first season might be short, abbreviated, because depending when it comes in, if it's going to get picked up for a first season. So you get like 10, 12, 13, somewhere in that range. But once it gets picked up and gets going, that's when you get the full season order of like 20, 24, 22, something like that. So like the X-Files and Buffy, they would have, especially, so for like Buffy, they would have their villain of the season. They would have the big bad for the whole season, right? But then they would also have these Monster of the Week episodes that they would have to pepper in, because 26 hours is a lot to write. So maybe you sprinkle just a couple minutes or something small of like your monster, your big bad of the season in a couple of these episodes. But still, there's probably like 6 to 8, 10 episodes in there where it's just random monster movies, right? X-Files did that really great as well. They did a lot of Monster of the Week episodes where it was like, okay, one of the great ones was called The Fluke Man, where it was like this man who was like a half man, half fluke worm, right? And they had a bunch of these other things with psychics or these other things where they were monsters of the week. Then with X-Files, you had these mythology episodes that were this whole greater mythology about Mulder and his sister being taken, and this conspiracy that went along of people with the cigarette smoking man who were the shadow people behind the scenes pulling the strings and trying to clone aliens and humans and all this stuff. And then that alien bounty hunter came up and all this other stuff, right? And one of the writers on that podcast with Kamal Nanjiani talked about, it's hard to write that many episodes of a show and keep a consistent story for that long. So you have to take some of these Monster of the Week episodes and you have to start coming up with ideas. And even then, even if you say, okay, let's do 24 episodes, we're going to do half and half. Half of them are going to be about a big overarching season-long or series-long thing. Now we need 12 other episodes that we're going to fill in these gaps of just random weird stuff, right? And then the writers were even talking, like the writers even said, like at some point you just start taking stuff off the wall that maybe makes no sense, or just like everyone in that room is sitting there like, this really isn't the best idea, but we got to come up with like 3 more episodes for the season. So yeah, we're gonna do this for Twillicrit's dummy episode, or stuff like that. Like, but that's what they end up having to do sometimes. So an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was really great. They were called the Scooby Gang, right? So you had Buffy. She was the Slayer, the one girl of generation who has all these powers and does great stuff. Allison Hannigan's character, Willow, she got into witchcraft and she was very strong and powerful with her magic and everything. They had what was called the Watcher, Giles, who was the Watcher over Buffy, but he had all this knowledge about these mystical things and monsters and had this massive library. But he was also a badass himself. He had the nickname Ripper. He almost got a spin-off himself. Then there was a dude named Xander, right? Xander was just a dude. That's all he was. He was just like, they were all in high school. He was just like a 15, 16-year-old dude along with the other two. And he brought nothing to the group. Like, he wasn't very big. He wasn't very strong. He was always the one getting caught or getting hurt or putting himself in danger that Buffy had to go save, right? So there was one episode called The Zeppo. And it was based off of, I think it's one of the Marx brothers, like one of Groucho Marx's brothers. I think it's Zeppo Marx. Where they had this whole big thing that was going on in the background of the episode that Buffy and all these other people were trying to fight. And they kind of kicked Xander to the curb because he didn't bring anything to the group. And he was probably going to get himself killed or something bad was going to happen to him, right? What they didn't know was Xander went off on his own and had his own adventure, which is what the episode followed. Mm-hmm. And it showed, like, there was actually some crazy dudes who who had a bomb planted in the bottom of the school who were going to blow up the school while everyone was in it, including, like, all the fights that were going on upstairs.
Wow.
Nobody knew about this, right? Except for Xander. Xander saves the day, and nobody knows. And then, you know, like, it shows at the end where, like, they're all, just after every fight, you know, they got, like, their faces all dusty and dirty, and there's blood, and, you know, they're talking about, oh, man, I can't believe we made it through that, blah, blah, blah. Xander just kind of walks out with a smile, and it was one of those, like, you never know what's going on in the background of some of these things. So it was a very long diatribe, but I say all that to say, I think there's a balance, because I think there has to be, like, yeah, it's great to have some of these long seasons for stuff, and I would enjoy some of these to have more. But then I think they've learned when you get to some of these really long seasons of like 20, 22, 24 episodes, there's a lot of them in there that really aren't that good. So sometimes like these writers and creators put all their heart and effort into stuff, and maybe it just doesn't work out, and people watch it and say, "Yeah, that wasn't that good." But they put an effort into it, and you can give them credit for that. Like, they tried. Maybe the idea just, it sounded good in their head, and it just didn't come out well on paper. That's one thing. But I think even some of these people would say, like, sometimes when you're doing these really long seasons, like, some of these ideas aren't the best, but they don't have a choice because they got to come up with like 3 or 4 more episodes, and they end up with less than stellar ideas that end up having to go out there, and it just ends up being not their best effort, but it could have been stronger had they cut it a little bit short. So I kind of think like maybe the 13 to 15 episode thing is kind of the best range for a lot of this stuff. Somewhere in that range is probably the best idea, where it's not too long. It's not like some of these where you just get 6 episodes and you got to cram everything in there with 6 episodes, and there's no side development, there's no other wacky adventures. They might touch on stuff and you might be thinking, oh, I'd like to see more of that. But you're never going to get more of that because they only had time for 6 episodes.
Right.
But, you know, when you get 24, then you get way too much of that, way too much more of that other stuff, and you're like, they should have cut some of that. But if you're like 12, 13, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I feel like that's why like cable would always have like 16. Like USA Network shows would have like 16 episodes, and it was pretty good balance. Then everything started getting cut to 13, then to 10, and now we're at like 8 or 6. It's but frustrating.
Also with that too now is because a lot of it's done on streaming and you don't have commercial breaks. Like a lot of it too before is like, okay, we got to fit it down into a 22-minute runtime or a 42-minute runtime because we got commercial breaks and all that stuff. Then when you started getting stuff on HBO, like you had the full hour. Every now and then you might be able to get like an extra 5 or 10 minutes or a couple minutes here and there. You get a couple minute overrun because it's HBO or Showtime, and you can do that stuff, right? But now with streaming, because it's on Disney Plus, because it's on Peacock or Paramount, you can go 38 minutes. You can go 56 minutes. Like, you can go all these weird times and tell the exact story that you want to tell for that episode. Instead of, like, trying to say, okay, do we need to cut this out? Is this going to be, people going to understand this? Like, instead, you can now tell that whole story for that episode that you want to tell in the time you want to tell it. And I think that works out pretty well sometimes, too.
Yeah. Well, back to this. This show is only 6 episodes, but the good thing is we got a second season, which will bring this out to 12 episodes. And to me, it feels like a much more breathable story when you have this. And I actually think season 2's pacing has probably been better than season 1's, which was a little breakneck speed. This one, we've been able to kind of take little moments. Every episode is 50 plus so far, which I like. It's giving us tons of time to really settle in on the story and the character moments, and no episodes feel like super short to me or very long at all.
Did the first season kind of vary? Was it like some were 32?
I think it did. Just off the top of my
51,
head.
I think, because I know the first couple series that Marvel put out there, like WandaVision, a couple other ones had varying runtimes with some of the episodes.
Right. Yeah, that's usually how they are. Even for Star Wars, you'll get some that are like 34 minutes and then some that are 50 minutes, and you're just like, you never know what you're going to get. Season 1 was 55, 52, 55, 43, 49, 50, 47. So we're getting a little bit more in season 2 so far. But we haven't had anything as short as 43. We've had 47, 51, and 55. But it just feels like we're having enough moments. And also, like, they had to set up so much in season 1 with the whole first episode or two is really focused on Loki.
What is the TVA?
And what the TVA is. While this, we've been able to kind of jump right in. We know that stuff, and we're able to kind of just jump right back into it. But yeah, so we have our Kang, or Victor Timely, decides to go with, right? Sylvie doesn't pull the trigger, right? She spares him, and he goes with Loki and Mobius. They needed his aura, which is why they were getting missed minutes anyway, for an override. But now that they found the real thing. And that's the thing, too, that I really like, is Mobius is like, look, we got the real thing. Let's just get him. But he doesn't know how scary He Who Remains is. And Loki can only tell him. And Mobius is just looking at, stuttering Victor Timely, is like, this guy who's showing about light bulbs is what we're so scared about. And he
brings up, that's a later problem. Like,
yeah,
we have our own problem now. So,
right.
I guess maybe because I wasn't in the room, I don't see how Loki is so intimidated or scared of He Who Remains. Like, to me, he still wasn't intimidated. Like, Thanos, I mean, and maybe just because I'm looking at it differently, like, Thanos was scary, was intimidating. He was a mad titan. He Who Remains, Kang, was just a dude behind a desk. That just wasn't intimidating to me.
I think what was so intimidating to Loki is that He Who Remains knew everything that was being said. He knew everything that was going to happen. There was no way to get around him. And then he offered him the choice, right? Of, all right, kill me, take my spot, or just kill me and let everything go. And then what you're going to have is millions of versions of me who are going to, fight to the death pretty much and want to take over the world. And then one of them was successful. That was me. And then I instituted all of this stuff. So I think for Loki, it's like, all right, so if we killed him and now we didn't take his place, right? We're letting the timelines grow. There's going to be lots of this guy. And from what he already knew from He Who Remains is that it causes a multiversal war. And then the fact is, even when that war ends, it was won by He Who Remains. And then he kind of put everything back on the path of being, him in charge of everything. So I think what it is like, Thanos says he's inevitable, but I think Kang is the most inevitable because if you let the timelines go, tons of Kangs, all wanting the same thing. If you let the timelines not, go, then you have to let He Who Remains be in charge or, limit free will. I think that is kind of what was so intimidating to Loki. It's almost like this
but
choice.
ultimately, doesn't it happen no matter what? Because they kill the future version of him, so he's still going to end up being in charge, which is going to lead to that future version of him that they end up fighting.
Yeah, I guess that's the question of, kind of going back to the question of, is this Victor Timely going to become He Who Remains, or is He Who Remains really dead and now we're kind of in this whole unknown territory on what we're in? Is this a second multiversal war that we're building up to after He Who Remains won the first one, or is it a loop? And I think that's a question we're going to have answered by the end of the season. I think I would assume that we're going to know more on what his deal is, right? It is, and I don't know how they can come out and say it without just coming out and saying it either. Like, I don't know if they're, they always say show don't tell. I don't know how you can show it without really explaining if this is the same He Who Remains or the same multiversal war if they get to that point. That's the kind of thing, because you're going to have to be able to describe it to people that may not be able to follow this stuff as much. So I don't know. I'm kind of, I don't know where they go from here in that regard of how they're going to explain to us really just who he is, or again, is it all in the past now? Because like we had before, even, right? We had Loki time slipping, and he was seeing He Who Remains face everywhere. I don't know. And we're going to get introduced to Victor Timely, maybe possibly meeting Obi, right? Because they have to fix the temporal loom together. And this is a guy he wants to meet anyway because he wrote the book. I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to be more like a loop than anything at this point. All right. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
No. Like I said, I really enjoyed this episode. We got 3 more weeks.
Yeah, halfway through. Goes fast.
I'm pretty sure we'll see Renslayer again.
Yes.
Obviously, we know we'll see Sylvie again.
Yes, because we still have to get to that point of the first episode again.
Yeah. Wonderful to see McDonald's again. That's it. Or you think we're done with McDonald's?
I think we're done with McDonald's. Yeah, I think we're done.
Or maybe at the end, Sylvie goes back to Oklahoma to live out her life working at that McDonald's.
True.
Apparently in the comics, Timely created someplace in Wisconsin where, like, I guess I read, like, every block was a different time period.
Oh, that's awesome.
Inside the city, so maybe he ends up going to a place in Wisconsin because he was already there. So who knows?
Yeah, that's there's so much good stuff they can do with Kang and stuff, and I'm very happy that we are getting him in the show and not just the films, because he has in the comics so many variants. There's a reference to this variant in this a little bit here, where when he's hiding out, he goes to the ancient Egypt section, and that is maybe a reference to Rama Tut, which is a pharaoh variant of Kang in the comics. He's
Didn't
actually
they show him in Quantumania?
They did. Yeah, they did. In the second post-credit scene, we do see Rama Tut and some of the other versions as well. So just fun that we get a chance to be able to intersect these with the shows where we kind of get more time with him than we get in a movie. if we're doing this type of story in 2002, like with Spider-Man 1, right? Spider-Man 1 comes out, that's like the new age of superhero movies. They started making so many more superhero movies due to that. If they tried a Kang story back then, you're getting Kang for like one movie and that's it, because that's seemingly what they used to do, right? Like Green Goblin, one movie, he's dead. Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock, one movie, he's dead. And then Batman did the same sort of stuff, one movie, Joker's dead. And with this, at least with the MCU, we get these characters over longer times. Like Loki would have been a character killed off in Avengers or Thor 1 if we're talking about early 2000s. Now he's been this character that has been a huge fan favorite and has a show, merchandise. He's in lots of movies. That's the good thing about the cinematic universe.
I agree, but I think also going back to those early like Spider-Man movies, the great thing about those were you got your conclusion at the end. You got your good triumphing over evil. Not to say I think Spider-Man 2 was better. I like Doc Ock a lot better now for Molina, a lot better than Green Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say I wouldn't have enjoyed more Doc Ock, and I eventually got it in this last Spider-Man movie. Alfred Molina's a treasure. Love that guy. But I mean, and unfortunately, I think they wanted when they would have liked to have had the Joker back for Dark Knight Rises. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes. So they made some references to him in there, but obviously they couldn't.
I was also talking about Batman '89, Jack Nicholson. Yeah. He dies in that one too. Joker.
Yeah. Okay, even that one, perfect thing. Like, do you really want more than one movie of that Joker though?
I don't even know if you need more than one movie. It's just, my problem was always just like limiting yourself, right? Like you kind of knew at the end of those movies, the bad guy was dying, in that era of film. They would just die. Sometimes not at the hand of the heroes, like in Spider-Man, because that would be, not what the Spider-Man would do. But it just kind of became like a trend of, oh my God, we're killing off all these characters. Sometimes it'd be nice to just kind of put them in jail and say, hey, you know what? If we come up with a good story after that, we can bring them back. But it all kind of paid off in Spider-Man No Way Home anyway. So it was good.
Two things on that. One, when they made the original He-Man movie, they tried that, and unfortunately they just never got around to making a sequel because the ending was so horrible. But they did have, like, Skeletor didn't die at the end. He came back. Two, I don't know if they could do it. Would you like an Arkham Asylum movie?
That'd be great. Something like that. I mean, or even... So I've been saying this a lot, and like I said, Spider-Man 2 just came out, the game. The Spider-Man game is probably my favorite interpretation of the character. Over comics, over movies, over shows, all that stuff. Because they do a lot of good stuff there, but they also have a Spider-Man that's in his prime. All of his villains are active. You can run into any of them in the game that you want. They have a lot more time to spend with that too, because it's a game and not a show or a movie. But you can, it's a really great story in that first game. The second one has a great story too. The Miles Morales game has a great story. All of that stuff. I just really like the way that they've been handling the characters. But one thing I really like is just seeing these villains just pop up. They go to jail. Oh, they come back out at some point. And you either face them again, or now they're teamed up with somebody else that you haven't fought before. And now you have to fight them, or you can kind of play around with more stuff. They have history with the character already. So like an Arkham Asylum game, or a game or like a movie based off Arkham Asylum, or a Spider-Man movie that's more like the games, where they're all kind of active, just like they are in the comics, where they one issue can be an issue with Kraven, the next issue can be an issue with Venom, and the next issue can be one of Green Goblin, stuff like that. Or sometimes they all team up, Sinister Six. That's the kind of stuff I think is really fun.
The Batman Arkham Asylum game was a fantastic game.
Yes.
Fantastic idea.
That whole trilogy is really great too. I mean, we're really blessed if you're a fan of Batman or Spider-Man. They've got some really great video games. We need some more video games based off some of these other characters, but if you give them to a really good publisher, or like a not publisher, but like a development studio, game developer that can just put the story above everything else, they're fans of those characters, you get really great games like Rocksteady with Batman and that whole trilogy, or Insomniac with Spider-Man. We just need to find somebody to do that with Superman, please. That'd be great.
But so here's the problem: how do you put Superman in peril?
Kryptonite, magic. He's also weak to magic.
Because I mean, that's one of the, like, I guess people have talked about it before, but it's one of those, like, how do you really, like?
I think you can do it. I think you just need to find a good developing studio that'll be able to come up with a great story that does place, health bars on you for whatever reason. Or I've seen some people say maybe the health bars are on the civilians instead that you're trying to save, and you have to try to, almost like a race to the finish type of thing, of stopping the bad guys before they hurt anybody else, or something on like a health bar on the city almost, right? Like from going from corrupt to or being overrun to being completely safe or something. There's ways that people can do it, but I think also it's a video game. I feel like I would totally buy a health bar on Superman anyway. Lex could be providing them with kryptonite bullets to regular street thugs. There could be, anything like that. Sign me up. Give me a job, and I'll make a Superman game.
But I think I've in my many years playing games and going online and listening to stuff, that's something that's always been brought up, with people want to do it, but it's because of how strong the character is. It is incredibly difficult to put him in a bad situation or have him in peril. And it's like, at least with Batman, he's still human, right? So, like in the Arkham games, he can get shot and die. Same thing with Spider-Man. Like, he can get shot and die in some of these things. If they did a decent Iron Man game, he's still vulnerable, right? Other than like Kryptonite, how do you make Superman vulnerable? How do you make him have this thing where he's not gonna, like I said, like you brought up, how do you put a health bar on Superman? It's difficult to do and see, and I guess some people said like they can't really see it happen just because it's Superman. It's supposed to have a health bar.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's just limitations you have to accept with gaming too, though. I mean, in the sense of like, I don't know, Superman's had health bars in other Superman games. I had a Game Boy game. My Game Boy game was pretty good, but or Injustice, right? Like, he has to have a health bar in Injustice. That's a fighting game. People play that, so.
But there was also a lot of rules put into that on stuff that they couldn't do.
Yeah.
They put a ton of rules in, as far as like, I don't like. Injustice doesn't have fatalities, but it's made by the same people who made Mortal Kombat series.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think they had their own version of fatalities, but then it was like, oh, we can't have Batman, Superman killing people.
Right.
Because even though it's been brought up many times, like, there's no way Spider-Man and Batman don't kill anybody in these games. It's just not feasible.
Yeah, I was just playing Spider-Man earlier, and I did something that I'm pretty sure would have killed somebody. I threw like a car on top of somebody.
Yeah, or manhole cover and whack somebody in the face with it.
Yeah, they're dead.
Or even worse, they're not dead. They're brain damaged. They're paralyzed for the rest of their life, and they're vegetable, or they're developmentally disabled now. Like, to such a level where they can't do anything for themselves. They can't do anything at all, right? So it makes it bad. So, like,
Alrighty, well that'll wrap us up. Give me a job. I'll create a Superman game and we'll get it done. But you can reach us on Twitter at TO Infinity Saga. Email marvelplusrecaps@gmail.com for any sort of feedback. And we're halfway through Loki season 2 already. Next week is the final episode of the ones that the critics got ahead of time. So I'm expecting another strong episode, since they said season 2 was kind of consensus of the worst of the 4 that they watched. So I'm really expecting another one that's kind of closer to maybe what episode 3 was, which we both really enjoyed. I'm assuming it's going to mostly be Victor Timely and stuff in the TVA with the temporal loom and fixing that, and then whatever kind of stuff comes from that, we might get the Ravonna Miss Minutes conversation, right? I think those are two big strong plot lines that they can have follow up in this 4th episode here.
Yeah, we need that scene.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll catch you next week when we talk Loki season 2, episode 4.